Last season, Ohio State ended up winning a national championship with Will Howard, who transferred in from Kansas State, and many were wondering who would be the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes in 2025. Would they end up going with an experienced guy like Lincoln Kienholz? Would they go get a transfer out of the portal? Or would they play their redshirt freshman in Julian Sayin? The answer was the latter, as Sayin ended up taking the starting job, and after a slowish start, he has now become one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football and is playing his way into the Heisman race at the moment. In today's video, I want to talk about how Sayin got to this point though. He was at one point the #1 quarterback in his high school class, had to leave Alabama because Nick Saban retired, and now is having an incredible season for the Buckeyes. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you need to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the insane rise of Julian Sayin. Okay, so in order to understand how he got to this point, we first need to go back in time. At an early age, Dan Sayin noticed his youngest son played Madden football a little bit differently than other kids. The way that he utilized motions, audibles, and play calls in the video game made it seem like he understood football. Eventually, both him and his brother Aiden got their start in Carlsbad, California's Friday Night Lights flag football program. Julian said, quote, "FNL and football with my dad gave me a start. And Dad never forced football on us, and we absolutely loved it from the start." Julian was always scrapping with his siblings, as he had an older sister who played soccer at the University of Chicago, another one that played soccer and beach volleyball, and then there was also Aiden Sayin, who ended up playing quarterback at the FCS level. They ended up growing up on the California beach, and eventually got to Carlsbad, and Aiden spent most of his days down by the water. His older brother started football training when he was in 7th grade, and at the time, the 4th grade Julian decided to go along with it and showed up to a lot of these sessions. He even messaged one of the best quarterback trainers in the country if he could train with him, and this guy just really wanted it. It sort of showed, as when Julian was in 8th grade, he got his first scholarship offer from Florida State. Kenny Dillingham, now Arizona State's head coach, was the offensive coordinator for Florida State, and he decided to offer Sayin. Dillingham saw lots of potential, and his mother said, quote, "I remember Julian was in the car hearing all this and just got out of the car and went to the beach with his friends. Later on, his dad and I were talking, and we're like, wow, this is incredible and surreal. And I said, did you say anything? And Julian said no, because it's not a real offer yet." Yeah, he'd always been pretty grounded and pretty humble, and he was fixated on how he was going to prove himself next. When he was in middle school, he wanted to attend Winter Circle Athletics, which was a charter school over an hour away. He woke up at 5 a.m. each day for this because he wanted to play with a different set of players than on his local Pop Warner squad. He wanted to get better. He eventually arrived at Carlsbad High School, and Aiden, the guy who played in the FCS, admitted that Julian picked up the high school offense faster than him, and he was literally doing better than he was as a freshman than Aiden was as a senior. One Carlsbad receiver said, quote, "Julian is amazing. He puts the ball in your hands every single time." He spent the 2020 season interrupted a bit, as obviously there was something going on in the world, but he did get garbage time reps. Now I'm going to introduce you to Christian Chapman, who was the quarterback's coach for the team, and he was the winningest quarterback in San Diego State football history. When asked who to compare Julian to, there was nobody ever met his age with his ability. Coach McNeil had become known as the quarterback whisperer in the area, as he had sent 17 different quarterbacks to college, and he said, quote, "Julian is the best I've ever had. He just has a skill set and he's a generational talent." As a starter as a sophomore, Julian completed 71.5% of his passes for 2,769 yards and 34 touchdowns. After that, he absolutely blew up as he visited Georgia, Florida, Florida State, Miami, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Texas, and walked away with offers from all of them except the Ohio State Buckeyes, the one school he did not throw for. Julian was all business, so much so that he even brought one of his quarterback trainers with him on a family vacation to Mexico. His mom said he was super structured, didn't like distraction, and that he can handle all the ups and downs. As a junior for Carlsbad, he ended up starting 12 games, throwing for 2,700 yards and 27 touchdowns, with only 4 interceptions. At the time, he was only 6'1", and the five-star decided to make his decision. He'd commit to the Alabama Crimson Tide over 29 other college offers, including Georgia and LSU. Why Bama? He said, quote, "Alabama is the standard by which other college programs are measured. All 3 of my final schools have great programs, which was a tough choice, but Coach Nick Saban is one of the best of all time, and Alabama's reputation for sending players to the NFL and grooming quarterbacks is second to none." In total, while he was at Carlsbad, he completed 71% of his passes, threw for 7,970 yards, 86 touchdowns, and only 10 picks. As a senior, he had 2,400 yards and 24 scores with only 1 pick. He also traveled down the street to Los Angeles for the Elite 11 quarterback competition, and he came away with the trophy. He was a finalist for the National Gatorade Player of the Year alongside Juju Lewis from Georgia and DJ Lagway from Texas. Greg Biggins from 24/7 Sports said that Julian was a pure thrower and might be the most ready to step in and play early of all the signal callers in the class of 2024. His football IQ was ridiculously high, and he had an advanced feel for the position. According to 24/7 Sports, Sayin was a 5-star recruit, the number 3 quarterback, and the 20th best player in the class of 2024. Some scouts believed he was either CJ Stroud or Tony Romo, and that is a lot of high praise. But despite seemingly having everything figured out, he'd be thrown a huge boomerang right when he got to college. Just weeks into his college football career, 17 years and 6 national titles later, Nick Saban decided to retire. Sayin had committed 434 days prior in November of 2022, and Bama was the only school Sayin took an official visit to. He visualized himself playing for Saban, and his parents were just a couple of days away from closing on a house in Tuscaloosa. Yeah, they were all in. Nick Saban obviously retired on the first day of spring classes, which kicked off a chain reaction of hiring and transfers. Kalen DeBoer came to Alabama from Washington, and he brought with him former 4-star recruit Austin Mack, who was from Northern California. For many, the transfer portal was exciting, but for Sayin, it was very scary. Alabama had been his dream. He said, quote, "There's definitely been a lot of emotions, but I had my family to lean on. They helped me through it." By that point, Julian got off all social media, as he knew there was going to be an onslaught of commentary from Bama fans and other schools wanting to try to get him. His brother said, quote, "Through the process, he didn't really care where everybody else was. He just wanted to go to a place where he thought he could fit into the system and get a shot to play in the NFL. In terms of where he would go, he visited multiple schools, but he really liked Ohio State. He remembered Ryan Day being super transparent, very clear and very honest, which is something they appreciated. He told Julian it was not going to be easy, and that they had a full quarterback room, but they believed in what he could bring to the table. It was easy from there. He would decide to transfer from Alabama to Ohio State and try to become the next great Buckeyes quarterback." When Sayin arrived at Ohio State, he said that he was extremely excited to join the team and that he held the program in high regard throughout the entire recruiting process and was looking forward to learning from some of the most talented players and coaches in the nation. It only took 72 hours for him to make the deal, and they are also really excited about Bill O'Brien coming into town. He joined an Ohio State roster that included quarterback Aaron Noland, sophomore Devin Brown, and redshirt freshman Lincoln Kienholz. Plus, you cannot forget Will Howard, who is transferring in to be the starter. Some would think that Sayin could be 5th on the depth chart, but he was so good, he rose up all the way to being the backup. It didn't take long for Sayin to get a ton of buzz, as he showed himself to be a quick learner and a fast processor. These are 2 things he showed throughout his high school career, and the biggest criticism of Julian was that he was only 6'1". It is important to note, though, that 4 times over the last 10 years, the first quarterback taken in the draft was 6'1" or shorter. Sayin had the arm, the accuracy, the understanding, the anticipation, and the mental intangibles to make all the necessary throws and to be a big-time player. There was no plan to redshirt Julian in 2024, but they also weren't necessarily going to force him onto the field for playing time either, as that would have to be earned, and you don't want to shoot his confidence either. Observers of Ohio State throughout the season said that he had the best arm talent of all the quarterbacks on the roster. One said, quote, "I think Julian Sayin probably has the best arm talent a quarterback has had at Ohio State since CJ Stroud. The potential he has at quarterback is real, and he also has a chance to be a special player for the Buckeyes." This past season, Sayin completed 5 of 12 passes for 84 yards, a touchdown, and no picks, while also rushing for 24 yards on just 2 rushing attempts. Obviously, he didn't get on the field much, but now it was probably going to be his team. Devin Brown decided to transfer to California, and Aaron Noland decided to transfer to South Carolina. And he would have to battle it out with Lincoln Kienholz. While the battle went well into fall camp, Sayin ultimately ended up being named the starting quarterback, and so far in 2025, he has been incredible. His first test came against Arch Manning in number 1 Texas, as at home in that game, he'd go 13 of 20 for 126 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, there were some growing pains and he was a bit underwhelming, but he was playing a good defense and it was his first start. He then followed that up with 4 touchdowns against Grambling and 3 more against Ohio. Ohio State was now 3-0, and he'd have his first road test against Washington. he ended up having a pretty good game, as Sayin ended up throwing for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they would beat the Huskies 24-6. From there, he'd come back home and play against Minnesota, and he had 3 touchdowns and then an interception in that one, and then the last 3 games, he has been on fire. He would help them beat number 17 Illinois on the road, and then ended up having nearly 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in a win over Wisconsin. This past weekend, after struggling a bit against Penn State, Ohio State really got it going, and Sayin had over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in that one. In his last 5 games, he has combined for 15 touchdowns without a single interception, and Ohio State is currently undefeated. He already has nearly 2,200 passing yards with 23 touchdowns and 3 touchdowns, and he's completing 81% of his passes. Sayin is having a pretty historic year for a first-time starter, and Ohio State is now ranked number 1 in the country. I'd argue the only quarterback who has been better than him this year is the team right behind them in Indiana, as Fernando Mendoza is probably the betting favorite at the moment. I mean, I thought Sayin would be good, but I did not expect him to be this good in his first season as a starter, and it helps to have weapons like Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. To finish out the season, Sayin will have to play against Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, and Michigan, and those first 3 games should be quite easy, but for some reason Michigan has caused Ohio State fits recently. I still think Ohio State's probably going to steamroll Michigan this season, but this will be the biggest game remaining on the regular season schedule for Sayin, and many will be wondering if he can finally lead Ohio State to a win in that game. But I think that is going to happen, and Ohio State is definitely probably the favorite to win the title right now. They should make a deep college football playoff run, and it does seem that Sayin is ready to step up and be that guy for them. It seems like he's always been in that position, as the former prodigy from California is now living up to all the hype he had. But what do you guys think? If you're an Ohio State fan, what do you think of Julian Sayin? And who's another college football player I could take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.